Okay, we have Sidney. Sidney, thanks for joining us today. I know you're very busy. Sidney Powell, as you know, the author of, in my mind, one of the best-selling books ever, if they actually put it on the shelf, which was License to Lie. They pulled it. Now it's all come true in real life again with the Michael Flynn catastrophe. Now been absolved of everything. He's been exonerated. Sidney Powell, his lawyer. Sidney, thanks for being with us. Boy, you were prophetic. You came on my show before Trump was president, before all this, talking about the abuses in the Department of Justice, the FBI, the prosecutors. Then you lived it with Mike Flynn again, and there it is for all the world to see. Unbelievable.
Yes, it really is stunning, John, especially when you see the handwritten notes of the federal agents having the conversations about trying to get him to lie or set him up for a lie, which is essentially what they did. He told the truth, but then they went back and they altered the 302s until they created whatever false statements they wanted to charge him on. It's absolutely appalling, and we still don't even have the original 302. But we can tell from the Page Strzok text messages, both of them made significant alterations to the point that Strzok was saying it was almost not in his voice. He was trying to keep it in the voice of the agent who actually drafted the original one, and he was concerned that he had made so many changes it was difficult to keep it in his own voice.
Of the handwritten notes that were passed back, as Flynn's lawyer, which one was the most damning? What did it say?
Oh, gosh, it's probably the handwritten notes of Mr. Priestap that we attached to one of the motions on my website, one of the supplemental motions to dismiss that we filed in the last 2 weeks. They're up at sydneypowell.com. There's a whole page for Flynn where people can read the exhibits and everything themselves. We also found evidence from the Covington files that there was a secret side deal for the prosecution and the defense lawyers, pursuant to which General Flynn's son would not be prosecuted. They had clearly threatened to prosecute him, and they did it as a secret side deal because the prosecutor didn't want any future defendant that Flynn might testify against to know that that was part of the deal. But obviously it was material term of the deal to General Flynn, so that means it was also hidden from the court. The guilty plea was coerced. There's absolutely nothing about this prosecution that was valid at all, ever. It was all a lie by the government, a frame job by the government, and we know now that it was discussed in the Oval Office with President Obama, according to Sally Yates, and a letter Catherine Rumler wrote on behalf of Susan Rice ages ago, and Comey's email and everything.
Tell us about the Obama meeting, Sidney Powell.
It was on January 5th in the Oval Office with Clapper, Brennan, Comey, Susan Rice, probably Valerie Jarrett, although I can't say her name was mentioned. I don't think they ever had a high-level meeting without her, President Obama and Biden, and they discussed the Flynn situation, the Steele dossier. That's when they dispatched Comey the next day to Trump Tower to brief President Trump only on the salacious aspects of the dossier, to set the news hook that BuzzFeed and CNN they knew were waiting for to run with the Steele dossier and blow it all up in the media. And, of course, they were working on the Logan Act pretext with respect to General Flynn, and Sally Yates admitted she was stunned when President Obama himself brought up to her the Flynn-Kislyak call that they knew there was absolutely nothing wrong with. This conversation was perfectly lawful and appropriate. The prosecution even had to admit that in court, but they used that as a pretext. And then as CNN is running the story on the dossier that they planted and leaked, Bill Priestap and Peter Strzok are sitting together watching it, and Strzok texts in another text the government has never produced to us, but we found separately, that they were watching the story explode on CNN, and that gave them a pretext to go interview some people.
Unbelievable. What was Obama's culpability here?
I think he had to have been in on the entire operation. That's what they were there discussing that morning. That's when they decided not to use that, not to tell Flynn or the incoming administration anything about the Russia stuff. It was a crucial part of the entire setup.
Trump was already elected. They were 2 weeks from the inauguration. What was their objective?
to completely undermine the inauguration. Flynn was the cornerstone of the insurance policy. Taking out Flynn was a key element of the insurance policy. On August 15, 2016, long before the election, Page and Strzok are texting each other about the insurance policy they discussed in McCabe's office. And then August 16 is when they opened the file against Flynn, and August 17 is when we just learned this December that they sent a FBI agent into what was supposed to have been a trusted presidential briefing for then nominee Trump, and used that opportunity to spy on and assess General Flynn's mannerisms and comments for 2 hours in case they needed to interview him later as a subject, i.e., if Trump was elected president and Flynn was in the White House.
Where do they position your client, General Flynn, as the centerpiece of their Trump takedown?
There were multiple reasons, John. One big one was that he was going to audit all the intelligence agencies and find all the billions of dollars that they've been using for black ops or siphoning off to wherever it's gone. I mean, I don't know. There's a huge scandal there. The Office of Net Assessment has essentially been a slush fund for people like Stephen Halper, and Colonel James Baker, who runs it, has been using it for I don't know what, because they haven't done a net assessment like they're supposed to do in 10 years. So that was going to be a big issue. He was going to downsize all the intelligence agencies because they're bloated and inefficient. He, of course, knows all the problems that went on in Benghazi, including who is responsible for them. He'd already spoken out directly on ISIS and on the excuse the Obama administration had for the Benghazi disaster. And he was very outspoken about the rise of ISIS and Obama's failure to do anything about it while he was head of the Defense Intelligence Agency for Mr. Obama. I mean, General Flynn's been a lifelong Democrat, but he's an honest one. So when he saw things wrong, he spoke out about it. Mm-hmm. And that put crosshairs right square on his back. And then when it was going to be apparent that he was going to be an influence in the Trump administration, they went berserk.
Because he knew where the bodies were buried.
Exactly.
Right, because he was a Democrat and he was in the administration and he was at a high level. Unlike somebody else coming in from the outside, like a John Bolton or somebody like that, who cares, right? He doesn't know what's going on. He served a long time ago.
He served for Flynn served for 33 years, including as head of the Defense Intelligence Agency under Obama. He knew a lot. He knew how it all worked. He knew where to look. He was going to help drain the swamp. He was a crucial figure, and he would have immediately learned about the FISA applications and the crap they were running, under the radar and behind the scenes to try to destroy him and Trump.
Because of his position at NSA, he would have learned about the fraudulent FISA applications.
Exactly.
And that would have put them all at risk.
Right, their whole operation was at huge risk. He would have discovered it within a few weeks.
So they had to take him out.
Exactly.
And so they set him up to take him out and get rid of him and then go from there. And then it seemed like it just snowballed and they got in deeper and deeper and deeper. What was McCabe's involvement in this? Go to McCabe, Comey. And by the way, we're with Sidney Powell, a license to lie, Mike Flynn's attorney. Sidney, you're short on time. I'm going to leave it up to Sidney Powell to tell me when you have to take off, all right?
Yeah, I'll answer this question about McCabe, and then I'm going to have to run.
Okay, McCabe, Comey, tell me their involvement.
Well, McCabe and Comey were both involved in dispatching the agents to the White House to ambush Flynn. They had a discussion with Mr. Priestip about it, who apparently tried to discourage it to some extent after second thoughts overnight, and that's reflected in his notes that are attached to our motion or our supplement to the motion to dismiss. And McCabe was also directing the edits and changes to the 302 until it finally met his approval. So this was all a deliberate, concerted, high-level effort to take out General Flynn and destroy the Trump administration.
Do you feel vindicated?
Not yet. We're making progress in that direction. When the actual people who committed the crimes are held accountable, because that's the only way the American people are going to be able to trust the justice system in the future. This is a first step in the right direction to exonerate General Flynn, but there's a whole lot more that has to be done.
How close is the prosecutor from Connecticut, Durham, How close is he getting to all this, and is his investigation, in your opinion, is it legitimate?
I think I have no doubt his investigation is legitimate. I don't know of anything about where his investigation stands. The only information I get is when the government decides to send me an email and it pops in my inbox with new documents in it.
Any chance any of these people will end up indicted?
They certainly better be.
Wow. Sidney Powell, man, I got to thank you for your work, and you've been talking about this for years and years. You put up with a lot of abuse, Sidney, a lot of negative stories on you. I followed them all. The fact that they took your book off the shelves, wouldn't let you sell your book. Look, you've been coming on my show for 10 years, okay?
I know. I was going to say thank you because you're one of the first people that was willing to listen to the truth and help get it out there. And the General thanks you and all your listeners, everyone who's contributed to the Defense Fund, everyone who's launched prayers for us. We feel surrounded and protected by those prayers.
I just got one final thing. How far back does all this go?
Oh, well, it probably goes back at least 20 years because that's how long Andrew Weissman has been allowed to do his evil doings as a member of the Department of Justice, protected by Mr. Mueller and Mr. Comey and promoted repeatedly until he was deputy director of the FBI, despite destroying Arthur Anderson and 85,000 jobs for nothing and sending 4 Merrill Lynch executives to prison on an indictment that didn't state an offense while he hid the evidence that showed they were innocent. I mean, it's been one thing after the other with him for his entire career, and I tried to expose it in License to Lie, and nothing got done about it.
Well, they took your book off the shelves in a coordinated effort. You couldn't sell your book, and then he was also the guy that did the Ted Stevens scam, right?
He was the supervisor of the guy who then went to do the Ted Stevens scam. Matthew Friedrich became the acting attorney general for the Department of Justice Criminal Division, and he micromanaged the prosecution of Ted Stevens after he worked with Weissman on the Enron task force and screwed over Anderson and the Merrill defendants.
Every so often in life, we get someone that comes along like Sidney Powell and just refuses to give up and keeps fighting. You're on the verge here of vindication, but without a Sidney Powell, I'm not sure any of this would have ever come to light. And so I thank you for your doggedness, your dedication, and just people don't know the crap that you put up with, the personal threats. I mean, you got your whole reputation trashed, everything that you put up with, and their ability to stop you from selling your book to make it a living was just unconscionable. But the tables, Sidney, have turned.
Yes, and frankly, John, I pay absolutely no attention to things that other people say when they have no idea what they're talking about. It's pure slander.
Sidney Powell, thank you. John
Thank
Fredericks.
you.